Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're doing something a bit different. We're not just, looking at old texts or notes. We've got this incredible stack of sources, really intense esoteric stuff, Gnostic teachings, Mithraic rituals, even critiques of modern tech. And our goal, it's to piece together an entire philosophical worldview, a really radical, rebellious one, drawn completely from this material.
That's the mission, yeah. We're essentially constructing this world for you piece by piece. And it's not just some ancient belief system. It's a complete cosmology, highly dualistic.
Yeah.
And it tackles the big questions, right? Why are we even here? And crucially, how do we get out?
And the core idea weaving through all these sources is pretty startling. It argues that this material universe, this world we live in, the sources sometimes call it Malkuth, the kingdom.
Right.
It's not some divine gift. It's actually fundamentally a prison. A prison. And according to these texts, it wasn't built by some all-loving supreme god. Oh no. It was the work of an ignorant kind of false god, the demiurge. So today, we're going to map out, the architecture of this prison, and then the really key part to find the escape route, this radical, heroic solar path of transcendence. And that path involves facing the ultimate enemy, Saturn, who they call the Lord of Time.
Wow. Okay, that sets the stakes about as high as they can go. Let's dive right in. The foundation of this worldview, defining this architect, the demiurge, and the prison itself.
Okay, so the foundational idea here is it's a total rejection of creation as we normally think of it. For this tradition, the material world isn't just flawed, it's like irredeemably flawed. The sources are pretty blunt. They say the whole cosmos is basically a huge tragic mistake, and it was brought into being by this demiurge, and he's consistently described as inferior, ignorant, and malevolent.
Okay, hold on. If the demiurge is ignorant, how did he manage to build something as complex as the universe? And more importantly, trap actual divine sparks inside it? Doesn't that take some, cleverness?
That's a great question. The sources suggest his power comes from cosmic arrogance, not real wisdom. He genuinely thinks he's the ultimate god, the only one, because he literally can't see anything higher. He's blind, essentially. So he didn't intend to build the universe perfectly. He was trying to copy the higher realms of true divine space, which the Gnostics called the pleroma, the fullness of divine light. But he botched it. He ended up making this flawed and transient reflection.
So, Malkuth, our world, it's literally a bad copy of a higher reality, like a cosmic knockoff.
Exactly, a knockoff. And the sources are explicit. They reference a Valentinus, a key Gnostic teacher. He apparently said something like, "The world came about through a mistake." Quote, "For he who created it wanted to make it imperishable and immortal. He fell short, for the world never was imperishable." You see the demiurge's failure everywhere, right? Entropy, decay, death. All the limits of this material world. He tried for paradise, but built a cage defined by time.
And what does that mean for us, for humanity? Where do we fit into this, this flawed design?
Well, we're the tragedy inside the machine. The sources explain that the human soul isn't originally from here. It's a divine spark. They call it pneuma sometimes. It came from the pleroma, that true realm of light. But now it's trapped, imprisoned inside the corruption of flesh, as they put it, and that flesh is caught in this material world, Malkuth. So our basic state is one of, bondage and forgetting.
Spiritual amnesia. We're light trapped in darkness, and we don't even remember where we came from.
That's the demiurge's masterstroke, isn't it? Convincing the divine spark that this fleshy prison, this material muck, is its real home. So, liberation, freedom. It only comes through Gnosis. That's not just belief. It's direct, sudden inner knowledge, like a lightning flash that shatters the illusion and reminds the soul, hey, you're from somewhere else, somewhere luminous.
Okay, but a prison needs guards, right?
Yeah.
The demiurge wouldn't just build it and leave the doors unlocked. That takes us to the agents of control. Who are these cosmic jailers? How do they keep the illusion running?
Good point. These are the archons. They're called the governors of the material world. Think of them as the demiurge's administrators or maybe his enforcers. Their job is basically to maintain the deception, to keep the pneuma, the divine spark, from waking up and remembering its true nature.
And the sources link these archons directly to the planets, don't they? Like the astrological forces.
Yes, exactly. That's a key part of the cosmic map here. The archons are tied directly to the forces we associate with Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Mercury, and the big one, Saturn. They aren't just abstract concepts. They're seen as the active controllers of planetary influences that shape human life, fate, destiny. They make sure the cycles of time, fate, astrology, all of it keeps the soul locked into rebirth, preventing escape.
So they manipulate us through our own drives, our ambitions, our fears. How does that actually work?
Well, they play on the human psyche. They manipulate our core emotions, desires, ambitions. Think about it. The Archon linked to Mars might fuel fear and aggression, keeping us fighting each other. Venus. Maybe that drives endless base desires, keeping us chasing pleasure. Jupiter could inflate our egos with ambition for worldly power. By keeping humanity totally caught up in these forces, they maintain the prison of flesh and time. The divine spark stays tangled up, distracted, asleep. And this obviously puts this whole worldview in direct conflict with traditional monotheism, where God the Creator is seen as good and creation as a blessing. Here, the Creator is the problem, and the structures of the cosmos are fundamentally tools of control.
Right, this dualism creator as tyrant, it leads to a really harsh critique of, well, pretty much any organized system trying to find meaning within this world. If the world's a prison, trying to decorate your cell doesn't get you free.
Precisely. And this is where the sources talk about lunar systems. These are paths that focus on, let's say, reception, devotion, integrating with the material world rather than that active solar transcendence we mentioned. And the critique starts with the biggest systems of all.
Okay, so the sources call out apicnic monotheism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam as the demiurge's ultimate trick. That's a huge claim. Can you unpack that a bit?
It is a huge claim, and it seems rooted in how they interpret the character of the Creator God in, say, the Old Testament. The sources argue these religions are the demiurge's greatest illusion. Why? Because they managed to convince billions that this flawed, limited creator was the one true infinite God.
So the God of laws, the God demanding obedience, the one who claims dominion over this world, that's the demiurge or maybe the chief archon in disguise.
That's exactly the argument presented. They describe this deity as a god of laws, punishment, and fear, one who demands total obedience and submission. And from the Gnostic perspective, that's the opposite of the radical self-knowledge, the Gnosis, needed for liberation. By getting people to submit to external authority, focus on earthly rules, the soul is basically discouraged from looking beyond the demiurge's system, towards the true light, the pleroma. It's spiritual control masked as piety.
And this critique doesn't just stop at religion, does it? It extends to political systems, too.
No, it absolutely doesn't stop there. Because in this framework, both the sacred and the secular can be systems built by the archons to keep the soul grounded, tied to the material. The sources argue that political ideologies, even ones that seem totally opposed, like democracy and communism, actually share the same fundamental flaw. They both anchor the soul firmly in the material world. They prevent transcendence.
Okay, I think I follow, but how is democracy, which is supposed to be about freedom, seen as a trap in these sources?
Well, within this specific esoteric view, democracy offers only the illusion of self-governance. The sources claim it actually reduces people to just consumers of ideology. It puts spiritual goals beneath material ones: equality, trade, collective security. By focusing on the group, on the physical comfort of the majority, it kind of neglects the potential of the exceptional individual, the potential solar hero. It can lead, they argue, to a tyranny of mediocrity, where spiritual striving gets flattened.
And communism, on the other hand, is rejected because it just denies the spiritual altogether.
Exactly. Communism gets critiqued for its total material reductionism. Humans are just cogs in a machine aiming for some earthly paradise. So the view presented here is that both systems, by keeping the soul focused entirely within Malkuth, within the prison, are just tools of the archons. They maintain the lie that freedom can be found inside the material world, which just keeps the prison walls intact.
This then leads us into the esoteric systems themselves. It seems even paths focused on mysticism, like Kabbalah or Freemasonry, are reinterpreted here as really subtle traps.
This is where that solar versus lunar distinction really comes into play. Lunar systems reflect, they integrate, they try to refine what's already there. So when these sources look at Kabbalah, particularly the traditional Sephiroth, the Tree of Life, well, they don't see a ladder to God. They see it as the very machinery of the demiurge's madness, a kind of structured blueprint of the prison itself.
Wow. So even the spiritual goal of Tikkun Olam, repairing the world, is seen as, what, helping the jailer?
That's the provocative interpretation, yes. It's viewed as an act of re-enslavement. The argument is that trying to fix or perfect this flawed creation actually just stabilizes the demiurge's system. It shores it up rather than helping us break out. It's a lunar focus receiving and channeling the reflected light of the false god to make the prison more orderly, maybe more beautiful, but still a prison. It keeps the soul bound to the cycles, preventing it from seeking the pleroma's unmanifest light.
How does this same critique apply to Freemasonry then?
Freemasonry is often seen in these sources as the sort of practical, maybe even architectural wing of this material focus, the great architect of the universe. These sources explicitly identify him as a demiurge wearing a different hat, and the goal of perfecting the temple, whether that's the self or society, that's interpreted as simply refining the prison, making it a more comfortable cage. Even the core symbols, the compass and square, aren't seen as tools for divine creation. They're seen as instruments enforcing the rigid order of the demiurge's design. They symbolize limitation, material law, keeping the initiate locked into the rules of the created world.
So mystical integration, rational construction, both viewed as just different ways to keep the soul tethered to this material reality. But you mentioned something fascinating about the Q-Hatha husks or shells, usually seen as evil. How can the machinery of madness also hold the key to escape?
It's a paradox, isn't it? And it's crucial for the solar hero archetype we'll get to. If the Sephiroth represent the luminous, ordered structure of the prison, then the Qliphoth are like the chaotic waste product. The glitches in the matrix, maybe. They're the evidence that the demiurge's creation isn't perfect, that it's unstable, flawed. They represent the cracks in his rigid system. The Qliphoth embodies chaos, and chaos, in this view, is the only thing truly outside the demiurge's predictable, binding order.
So the hero has to exploit these cracks, not avoid them.
For the solar path, yes. The Qliphoth aren't just evil to be shunned. They're recognized as openings, as evidence of the system's inherent instability. Now, engaging with them is incredibly dangerous, the sources warn, but it's by confronting and mastering this chaotic instability, this dark side of creation, that the spiritual warrior finds the leverage point, the point from which they can potentially shatter the whole system rather than just trying to rearrange the furniture inside it.
Okay, that sets a really dramatic backdrop for looking at the modern world through this lens. Let's move to section 2.3, the critique of modern degeneration. And just to be crystal clear for everyone listening, we're presenting these critiques as they appear in the source material. This isn't our endorsement, but an exploration of how this specific Gnostic worldview interprets contemporary society as, well, further proof of the demiurge's influence.
Right. Impartiality is key here. The sources highlight, broadly, 3 areas of modern spiritual decay. First, there's a heavy focus on materialism. They describe the modern world as relentlessly enticing with fleeting pleasures, the whole allure of the material. And this, they say, leads directly to spiritual forgetfulness, spiritual abandonment. The soul gets drunk on sensory input, consumerism, temporary highs, and forgets its real transcendent origin. So the battle becomes internal. It requires discipline, renouncing the superficial, and crucially, transmuting those base material desires into spiritual gold through intense self-mastery and restraint.
Then there's the critique around equality and hierarchy. The sources seem to push back very strongly against modern egalitarian ideas.
They do. They argue that the push for enforced equality, particularly material equality, leads to this tyranny of mediocrity. The idea presented is that the natural human drive for excellence, especially spiritual excellence, and the potential ascent of the truly exceptional individual gets kind of buried beneath the weight of the collective. So these texts insist on the importance of natural hierarchies, not necessarily social ones, but spiritual ones. They stress the need for the exceptional, the potential Gnostic or solar hero, to lead the way. The structure of society, they imply, should reflect these innate spiritual differences, not try to flatten everyone into material conformity.
And finally, a very current critique, transhumanism.
Yes. This is seen as the absolute endgame of materialism, the ultimate betrayal of the divine spark within. The sources are scathing, calling transhumanism the path of degeneration, the ultimate enslavement. Why? Because it represents humanity willingly choosing to sacrifice the eternal soul for technological upgrades to the flesh, the corruptible part. It's seen as submitting entirely to the cold logic of algorithms, effectively becoming programmable matter. It's the demiurge's final victory, perfecting the prison cell by integrating the prisoner into the technology of the prison itself. The soul becomes, potentially, a programmable entity, stripped of its sovereignty, permanently cut off from any hope of returning to the pleroma.
Okay, so if the obvious structures, religion, politics, society, even future tech, are all interpreted as parts of the enslavement machine, then the path to actual freedom must be hidden somewhere else entirely.
It has to be veiled, doesn't it? Hidden in plain sight, perhaps. And that leads us to a fascinating part of these sources, where the real knowledge, the real map, might actually be found.
This is a really interesting shift. The idea is that because the archons control the overt world, the obvious systems, the actual path to freedom is concealed, hidden in things we dismiss as simple children's stories. in these fantastical narratives that the sources claim are actually symbolic roadmaps for the soul's journey.
It's a beautiful concept, really, if you look at fairy tales not just as entertainment, but through an initiatic, esoteric lens. Suddenly, they become blueprints. Blueprints for Gnosis, for transcendence, and they manage to slip past the demiurge's intellectual traps because they speak directly to the soul in symbols.
Okay, let's take one. Cinderella. What's the hidden initiation there, beneath the ashes and the ball gown?
Well, Cinderella herself symbolizes the pure soul, the pneuma. Initially, she's trapped in the mundane world, right? Covered in ashes, oppressed by the stepmother and stepsisters. That's Malkuth, the material world. The stepmother represents the controlling archons, and the stepsisters could be seen as base desires or worldly attachments keeping her down. Her journey is her spiritual awakening.
And the specific symbols, the glass slipper, the fairy godmother.
The glass slipper is key. It's unique, it fits only her. This represents the soul's individuality, its unique, pure essence. Gnosis isn't one size fits all, it's about realizing your own specific divine nature. And the fairy godmother, she's not just waving a wand, she represents divine intervention. Grace, maybe? Help descending from the pleroma, the higher realms, to assist the soul in its ascent. The goal is union with the higher self, which is often symbolized by the prince.
That transformation from servitude and grime to illuminated royalty, that's a powerful metaphor for shedding the old, false self.
It really is. And think about Sleeping Beauty. That's all about spiritual latency, isn't it? She represents the soul in a dormant state, stuck the slumber of ignorance that the archons enforce. The castle, overgrown with thorns that no one can get through. Those symbolize the immense challenges and trials on the spiritual path. They protect the sleeping consciousness, but also block the unworthy.
And the awakening, the famous kiss.
The kiss isn't just romantic. It represents the direct influx of pure knowing. It's the moment of enlightenment samadhi. It jolts the soul awake from its material dream, restoring its memory of its true home, the pleroma. You can see echoes here of tantric ideas, Gnostic concepts of divine union, the merging of opposites needed to transcend.
Then we have a story that seems much more about physical, energetic ascent, Jack of the Beanstalk. This sounds like it connects directly to internal energy practices.
It absolutely does. The beanstalk itself. The sources explicitly describe it as the axis mundi, the world tree, that cosmic pillar connecting the lower earthly and higher spiritual realms. Jack climbing it, that's a clear symbol of vertical movement, the rise of kundalini energy up the spine, through the chakras or spiritual centers, aiming for higher consciousness.
And the giant living at the top. He's not just a fairy tale monster.
Not in this reading, no. The giant is the final hurdle. He represents the ego, the big, loud, false self, the constructed identity given to us by the demiurge and the archons. So Jack's journey isn't just climbing, it's a sophisticated spiritual operation. It involves mastering that primal life energy, the beans, the stalk, to confront and ultimately overcome the limiting false self that guards the entrance to the higher realms, the castle in the clouds.
Okay, and section 3.2, Alchemy and Gnosis and Narrative, ties this all back to the ancient art of spiritual alchemy, turning lead into gold, but on a soul level.
Exactly. These stories aren't just moral tales, they're alchemical recipes in narrative form. The transformations mirror the classic stages of Western alchemy. First, Negredo, the blackening. This is about dissolving the ego, burning away false identities, attachments. Think of Cinderella literally covered in black soot and ashes by the hearth, that's the Negredo, facing the darkness within. Then comes Albedo, the whitening. This is purification, washing away the dross, revealing the pure potential underneath. Like Cinderella being magically cleaned, appearing in shining white or silver, the soul is cleansed. And finally, Rubedo, the reddening. This is the final stage, illumination, spiritual perfection, the union of opposites, symbolized perhaps by the golden slipper or achieving spiritual goal, the creation of the immortal, awakened self.
Even a tale like Rumpelstiltskin, with its strange bargain, fits this alchemical model.
Oh, absolutely. The core act. Spinning straw, base material, our lower nature into gold, spiritual gold, the higher self. That is the alchemical great work in a nutshell. And the final piece, figuring out Rumpelstiltskin's true name. That's pure Gnosis. Knowing the true name or true nature of something, whether it's a demon, the ego, the demiurge, or the archons, gives the hero power over it. It's the power of direct knowledge to dispel illusion and break enchantments. It's Gnosis liberating the soul from bondage. So if the world is a prison and all the conventional systems, even some esoteric ones, are potential traps, then the only way out demands something different, an active, conscious, even defiant path. And this brings us from the symbolic maps to the ideal person who walks that path. the solar warrior.
A solar warrior. Okay, that sounds much more like a path of action, not just sitting and contemplating.
It absolutely is. This is the path of the warrior priest, or maybe the philosopher king. The source is connected to something called Hyperborean yoga. The emphasis is on transcendence achieved through rigorous self-mastery, mastery of the body, the mind, the spirit. The aim is to literally break free from the limitations imposed by the demiurge through sheer force of trained spiritual will.
So it's like an internal war against those limitations. What does that spiritual warriorship actually look like?
It demands total discipline, first off, and a kind of ruthless honesty in confronting your own inner adversaries, the fears, the desires, the false identities that the archons and the demiurge use to control you. A key part of this is mastering that primal life energy, the serpent power of Kundalini, directing it upward consciously to unite spirit and matter within yourself, achieving a level of self-mastery that literally transcends the normal limitations of the material world. It's about striving for genuine spiritual excellence, rejecting the comfortable mediocrity the archons want us to settle for.
And the Mithraic mysteries you mentioned earlier seem to offer the most detailed, practical blueprint for this kind of ascent, like a step-by-step guide to defeating those planetary archons.
Exactly. Mithraism. The 7 grades of initiation is presented in these sources as the solar path par excellence. It's not passive, it's an active initiatory journey. It involves 7 distinct stages or grades, and each one symbolically requires the initiate to confront and master the specific cosmic influence of a planetary archon. You have to overcome each jailer as you ascend towards the sun, and ultimately, beyond even that, to Saturn.
Okay, let's break down those 7 grades, maybe lay them out clearly for listeners, connecting the spiritual task to the specific archon being overcome at each step.
Right. Let's map the ascent through the archon spheres. 1. Corax, the Raven. This grade is associated with Mercury. Now, Mercury, as an archon, represents deceptive communication, trickery, maybe being lost in mere intellectualism or materialism. The Raven initiate learns humility, service, begins to understand the cosmic laws without getting trapped by them. It's about seeing through the initial layers of illusion. 2. Nymphus, the bridegroom, associated with Venus. The archon Venus governs base desire, lust, attachment to sensual pleasure. Here, the initiate must purify their desires. It's about the sublimation of raw passion into something higher spiritual devotion, maybe artistic creation transcending Venus's pull. 3. Miles, the soldier, linked to Mars. Mars, the archon of conflict, fear, raw aggression, physical limitation. The soldier confronts these directly. They must conquer fear, build inner resolve, develop spiritual courage. This prepares them for the deeper battles against illusion. 4. Leo, the lion, associated with Jupiter. Jupiter represents the archon of worldly power, pride, ambition, seeking authority within the demiurge's system. The lion achieves inner kingship. True sovereignty isn't ruling others, it's ruling yourself, your lower instincts, your ambitions. You become your own master, not a pawn of temporal power. 5. Perses, the Persian. This grade is linked to the Luna, the moon. The moon symbolizes the archon governing cycles, illusions, the astral plane, that realm of reflections, phantoms, shifting forms. The Persian must master these cycles, see through the deceptive nature of the psychic astral world through deep introspection and purification. 6. Heliodromus, the sunrunner, associated with Sol, the sun. Okay, now we're getting high up. This is the stage just before the final one. The initiate becomes a true bearer of divine light. They achieve illumination, direct gnosis, connecting with the transcendent source, having moved beyond the influence of the lower archons. 7. Pater, the father. The final grade, associated with Saturn. This represents ultimate mastery. The Pater isn't just free, they are a guide, a teacher. They've successfully navigated all the planetary archons, culminating in the biggest challenge, transcending time itself, which is Saturn's domain.
Wow. Okay, so the entire sequence is like a deliberate, strategic campaign for liberation. You systematically dismantle the influence of each archon, each layer of the prison, until you reach the ultimate boundary, Saturn. And right at the heart of Mithraism is that famous image, the Tauroctony of Mithras killing the bull.
Yes, and that central image, the Tauroctony, is interpreted here as the symbolic conquering of the lower material self. The bull represents primal, earthly energy, the power trapped in the material sphere. By slaying the bull, Mithras releases that trapped energy, that divine spark. It's an alchemical death. The death of the lower, earthbound nature brings forth true spiritual life and freedom. It's liberation through sacrifice at the base.
This active confrontational path. It needs more than just principles. It needs heroes, role models. Section 4.3 gives us archetypes of the solar hero, figures who embody this rebellion against the status quo.
Right. Alexander the Great, for instance. He's presented not just as a historical conqueror, but as a symbolic one. His relentless drive eastward is seen as mirroring the soul's journey, pushing through the demiurge's false, time-bound kingdoms, the material world, to reach Gnosis, the ultimate union, may be symbolized by uniting East and West, or spirit and matter. He embodies that unstoppable will of the warrior king.
And then there's Joan of Arc, who represents a different facet of the solar martyr.
Exactly. She's a really powerful figure in this context, a warrior saint. Her story is interpreted as one where divine instruction, Gnosis, empowered her to transcend the purely earthly, patriarchal structures of her time. Her mission wasn't just political, it's seen as fundamentally metaphysical, a direct action fueled by spirit against the corruption and spiritual laziness that had seeped into the material world. And crucially, her execution by fire isn't just a tragedy, it's interpreted as that necessary alchemical destruction that precedes rebirth. The fire purifies and transforms the warrior saint, ensuring her complete transcendence, burning away the last ties to the Archon's realm. So all these paths, especially the solar path, they lead inevitably towards one final, ultimate confrontation. Beyond the lesser Archons, beyond even the Sunrunner stage, lies the Master Jailer. All roads of bondage and liberation ultimately lead to the final gatekeeper, Saturn.
Section 5.1, Saturn, the final gatekeeper. Okay, he's the final Mithraic grade, the Pater, the father. But why is he also the ultimate obstacle, the one who determines if the soul gets free or stays locked in?
Because Saturn, often identified with the ancient god Kronos, is the very embodiment of time, of limitation, structure, endings, finality. He is the prison warden of the soul, according to these sources. He's the architect of physical reality in its most binding sense. His entire nature is to bind the soul to the relentless cycles of decay, death, and crucially, reincarnation. He enforces the demiurge's flawed, transient creation. So overcoming Saturn isn't just about beating one more Archon, it's about transcending the entire framework of time-bound existence. Three-dimensional reality, linear time, that's Saturn's cage. He is, in essence, the Lord of Entropy.
That makes him the ultimate cosmic adversary, the final boss. And the sources provide a specific myth, a story that acts as a kind of metaphorical instruction manual for defeating him. Section 5.2, Conquering the Dragon, the tale of Sir Valen.
Yes, the tale of Sir Valen is presented as the perfect allegory for this final stage. Valen is a knight, explicitly dedicated to this kind of spiritual warfare. He goes on a quest to find the hidden crystal heart. This crystal heart isn't just a treasure, it represents the ultimate gnosis, the knowledge needed to finally break humanity's chains, the chains of time and illusion.
And he doesn't just walk up to the dragon, right? He faces trials first. What does he have to overcome before the final confrontation?
That's right, there are preliminary tests. First, he encounters the beast of the mists. This creature whispers temptations, fleeting pleasures of the flesh, submit to the world's easy comforts. Defeating it symbolizes conquering temptation through matter, renouncing materialism and attachment to comfort. Next, he confronts the Lord of False Wisdom. This figure is described as a scholar draped in endless scrolls, spouting complex but ultimately useless arguments, sowing intellectual confusion. This represents overcoming the illusion of thought. Seeing through false intellectualism, perhaps the demiurge disguised as overly complex, binding philosophy that leads nowhere.
Okay, so he masters the temptations of matter and the traps of false intellect. Then he finally faces the main event, the Dragon of Ether. The sources describe this dragon pretty vividly, don't they?
Oh, chillingly. This dragon isn't just a big lizard, it is Saturn. It's the literal embodiment of time, death, and what they call the cold fire of Saturn. Its breath is described as pure entropy. It's the force that ensures everything falls apart, decays, ends. Valen's battle against it is the ultimate spiritual showdown, and during this fight he suffers a terrible but deeply symbolic sacrifice. His left hand is severed and his right eye is pierced.
Whoa, okay, let's pause there. A severed hand and a pierced eye. Why those specific wounds? What's the hidden esoteric meaning behind that sacrifice?
It's interpreted as representing the radical, unavoidable price of transcending Saturn's domain, the domain of time and matter. The left hand is often seen as symbolizing our practical ability to act in the world, to grasp and shape physical reality. Losing it signifies sacrificing that attachment to material action, to doing things in the demiurge's world. The right eye often symbolizes our primary physical sense, how we perceive the real world through sight. Having it pierced means sacrificing reliance on those limited three-dimensional senses, sacrificing the perception of linear time in order to gain a higher internal, non-temporal sight, true gnosis.
So you have to give up your grip on the material world and your normal way of seeing it to gain spiritual freedom. The sacrifice is the prerequisite.
That's precisely the interpretation, and the reward for the sacrifice is Gnosis achieved. When Sir Valen, despite his wounds, plunges his sword representing his focused spiritual will into the dragon's heart, something incredible happens. The dragon's heart isn't flesh and blood, it's revealed as the crystal heart, and this heart pulses with light from the pleroma. It grants Valen the ultimate knowledge and power the Gnosis needed to break the chains binding humanity. He gets the key, the understanding, the means to transcend the demiurge's entire system of time and decay. He has achieved the final mastery, the state represented by the Mithraic grade of Pater Father. Hashtag Chaj Haj outro.
Wow, okay, this has been, well, an extraordinary journey. We've essentially synthesized a complete, incredibly uncompromising roadmap for spiritual rebellion, all drawn from these diverse sources. The core message seems to be, the world, Malkuth, is an inherently flawed prison. The demiurge is its ignorant warden, using his planetary archons to enforce cosmic law. And liberation isn't passive. It demands a conscious, heroic, almost warlike struggle against the forces of time, illusion, and limitation.
Exactly. We've traced the paths the sources identify as enslavement, those lunar systems like traditional monotheism, Kabbalah, Freemasonry, paths that tend towards devotion, integration, trying to perfect the prison by building within it, and contrasted that sharply with the path of liberation. They champion the solar path of the warrior priest, embodied in things like Hyperborean yoga and the Mithraic grades. This path demands mastering internal forces, confronting the archons head-on, culminating in that ultimate battle with Saturn, leading not to perfection of the illusion, but destruction of the illusion.
So it really boils down to a fundamental choice for you listening right now. Do you follow a path that seeks peace, integration, making the best of life within the demiurge's cosmic order, within the structured reality of time and matter? Or do you embrace that radical, defiant solar path? The path of the warrior, seeking not peace with the cosmic order, but spiritual war against it, aiming for absolute, timeless freedom and sovereignty.
The sources are pretty clear on their stance. The solar warrior isn't looking for a truce with the cosmic order, they're seeking victory over it. If this material world truly is inherently flawed, irredeemable, then real freedom isn't found in building a slightly nicer prison cell. It's found in gaining the Gnosis, the inner power needed to shatter the prison walls completely.
What does that kind of radical internal war look like in your own life right now? That's the challenging, provocative thought we want to leave you with today. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the architecture of spiritual rebellion.